me start in order of the slide that you guys are seeing. Sumant Sinha, who's the founder and chairman and managing director of Renew Power, which is India's first sort of renewable energy unicorn. Just renewable power producer in the country, and megawatts that they've mentioned. Under his company has really grown to be the also chairs the Climate Group's India Advisory Board. So let's see. So person to have. I'm sensing you're not able to hear. Can you guys? Is this improved?
No, the line is somewhat unclear, Gaurav. You're coming in and going out.
Is it? Okay, let me just adjust it. We are having some struggles with Zoom at the moment. Nilgish, are we good now?
Yeah, that sounds better. Thank
you. Super. I won't redo that, but just to say it's great to have Sumant here from Renew Power. We then have Praveer Sinha, the CEO of Tata Power, who's had a long career in the energy space, and I think really understands the full value chain. Recently, a huge push into renewable.
Gaurav, we keep losing you and back.
Is it? Okay, give me a second. Let me. Okay.
Now we have an echo.
Now can you hear me? Is that better? Okay. I've just switched to my phone, so let's see if that works. So we have Praveer Sinha, CEO of Tata Power, Raman Nanda, CEO of SoftBank Energy. SoftBank has made a huge play into India and grown tremendously under his leadership. Raman also had his own startup in the solar space, which he exited in 2011. So also has that entrepreneurial journey as part of his DNA. And I'm really pleased to have Dr. Shalini Sarin, who has an incredible background that spans from a long time in the corporate sector, but then also really looking at the decentralized energy space and ensuring that when we are having this energy conversation, we're having this energy, we're also keeping the common person at the heart of it. How are they able to get access? But even beyond that, she's worked in energy efficiency and is currently engaged in a startup in the electrical battery space and recharging space. So really, again, someone that understands a big part of the value chain. So welcome, everyone. It's fantastic to have you join us today. This is going to be a sort of a Q&A approach. So I'm just going to kick us off with a question. And I think I'm going to ask my first question to Mr. Praveer Sinha, because as CEO of one of the largest energy companies in the country, which really operates at multiple levels, take us a little bit inside Tata Power. What's going on there right now where there's huge amounts of uncertainty as a result of COVID and post-COVID? What is, for you, keeping you up at night in terms of energy? What are you seeing as the future opportunities and major challenges?
Thank you, Gaurav, for having me on this show. First of all, power companies, even in COVID, have to work. We are part of the essential service. So right from day one, we've been operating all our plants, all our thermal plants, hydro plants, all our renewable plants, our networks. So COVID, to that extent, does not really impact us, excepting for the fact that it becomes a huge challenge to get our people to come and work and be safe while carrying out the work. So that is the main challenge that I have been facing. And that is what keeps me awake at night as to how to ensure that our people, our team comes and works and delivers. So that's the top of the mind issue that is there. But having said that, let me also tell you that this challenge is also giving us an opportunity to see that how we can do a different way of producing energy and supplying energy. Distributed energy, decentralized energy is something which is getting more and more emphasized, and going forward we'll find more and more of the communities, whether it is through the microgrids or mini grids, depending upon their own local sources, so that they become insulated from the challenges of large plants not being operating for whatever reason. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to liberate. Fortunately, in the last few years, there has been a very good push to the renewable energy. We also have very good more than 300 days of sunshine. So it is actually very nicely positioned to utilize and leverage the opportunity to get into renewable energy and do it in a big way. We initially saw that it was typically only in the space of solar or wind coming. We are now seeing that hybrid solutions are coming. Sumant and his company has bid for hybrid solutions. Similarly, there are solutions with storage also coming. So I think going forward, there will be more of play in these areas, and there will be huge amount of opportunity for large number of players to try out new ways of supplying electricity in a decentralized manner. So,
and we'll come back to the decentralized question as well. But let me turn it then to Sumant. So is the post-COVID world one that's given extra impetus to renewables? Or are you actually seeing a slowdown? What has this resulted in?
I don't think that we are yet in the post-COVID world. I think we are somewhere in a transition period right now, sort of in the twilight zone, as it were, where the old order may not be working, but the new order is still not emerged yet. So it's still hard to give a very clear answer to that question. But I would say that if you look at the momentum that was already existing before COVID hit us, there was already a very, very strong movement towards renewable energy. And I think that momentum is going to carry on regardless. The fact is that renewables now have a rationale and a logic which now in some ways goes even beyond climate change, which is the fact that it's the cheapest form of energy. And as storage becomes cheaper and cheaper, and ways of combining renewable energy make it more firm power, I think the adoption of renewables is going to just carry on happening. COVID or post-COVID or nothing to do with COVID, I don't think it really matters, frankly. So I think that is the path that you were on, and that is the path that is going to continue to further strengthen as we come out of this whole thing.
And is there oh. Sorry, Sumant, I was going to ask, is there space therefore for many more unicorns? Right, you've grown your company incredibly fast, but the size of the pie that the government talks about is large, and presumably there's an opportunity to accelerate some of that.
Yeah, Gaurav, the term unicorn doesn't really apply very well to our sector, to be very honest with you. And while people may call us a unicorn, it's not a definition that really sits well, because we are not a tech company, right? We are a IPP, which means that we execute large-size projects on the ground. We apply existing proven technologies. We have to make sure that they're bankable. Our projects that we set up will be running for the next 25 years. And so, unicorn is really a term used more in the tech world where people raise different series of funding and so on. In our case, our very first funding was a $250 million round. So, it's really not that relevant to us. But I think that the bigger question that you're asking me is, are there going to be a lot of companies that will start? Will there be a lot more value creation in the sector? And I think the answer to that question is yes, that would be the case. I don't think, however, that you'll have a lot of new companies now coming up, simply because this is now a space where scale has become very important, and it's a capital-intensive sector. And so, if you don't already have that scale now, just in our part of the sector, in our part of the value chain, which is the IPP part, I don't think you'll have a lot of new companies that will get started now, because when I started off, a 200 megawatt portfolio was a big deal. Today, a 2,000 megawatt portfolio is not a big deal, right? And so therefore, you really require maybe a $500 million, $1 billion of equity just to get started now. And yeah, sure, you'll create a lot of value over that. but uh, uh, but therefore the unicorn definition is not really very apt. But yes, there will be a lot of companies that will invest large amounts of money. They may already be set up, established companies that are diversifying into our sector or deciding to move from thermal into our sector, or like, let's say, SoftBank and Raman is there, companies that are operating in other parts of the world, or other parts of the other sectors getting into our sector. So those kind of things will happen. And there will be value created because this is a sector that is going to see a lot more investments in the future.
Let me switch to Shalini, because everyone's talking about renewables seeing a lot more investment. How does this translate for the common person? I mean, is the renewables the way to get energy to them the fastest? Is this going to be a source of great jobs in the future? How do you think this translates for the experience of people at home?
Yeah, so Gaurav, I think first of all, for the common man, affordability is most important. Affordability and easy accessibility. And while Sumant did mention that the renewables era had already begun because of climate change or stimulus and incentives or whatever, but also it is so the entire energy demand has gone down, right? Because of the slowdown in economy. But with renewables, we have the distributed power. With renewables, we do not have the cost of transmission and the grid. So I think renewables still has a better chance than reviving the traditional energy sources, because they take a longer time and they are not distributed. And there is transmission, transport of that through grid. And so while solar provides an option for us, the most important thing is that the capital cost of setting up solar infrastructure has been a deterrent in the past. And if there are MSMEs packages from the government that enable, set up solar infrastructure far and wide to serve the common man, of course, this is going to take off. And I think even beyond this, if we get some CSR push to deliver energy to a common man in the rural or suburban India, our villages could become self-sufficient. So I think, and the application, I mean, it's a dream which could become a reality today, because you could have local applications, local demand and local supply. And I think with as Prime Minister's entire talk of local production and local demand goes through, then we would have self-sufficient villages and self-sufficient suburban towns.
Can I just ask you on that, though, especially we've seen a huge move in migration, right? Migration back. And it's not clear if that will also come flooding back as well. And there is also now a push to see, actually, is this an opportunity to revive rural towns? How does a decentralized energy play a role in that? And to me, does that mean it's actually a pretty big business opportunity, of course, in small buckets? But instead of a CSR push, I mean, something like that feels like a major source of entrepreneurship of the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I again want to touch upon the point that Sumant mentioned, that, we will not have big, large players who will probably produce energy of 2,000 megawatts. However, there is a lot of job creation and a lot of ancillary businesses that can benefit because of this energy, and because of the migrant workers going back, and I don't know how many of them are going to come back to towns, we could look upon this opportunity, which is not grid dependent, to create local consumption, rural mobility. And I think it'll be a big lost opportunity if we were not to utilize this opportunity. And, I think the migrant workers who are going back are the younger youth. And we had the agriculture taken care by the older generation, and that was no longer attractive. And if that becomes attractive and we get new technologies, we get new impetus on even on the grid, the new technologies are adopted soon, we will have a lot of small and medium enterprises opening up in the rural India and in the suburban India.
Let me actually, on that jobs point, turn to Raman, because I know he's passionate about the role that renewable energy can play in jobs. But first, SoftBank has made a big bet on India. So I'd like to ask you, does that look like a safe bet? There's lots of things that, are you going to double down on the progress you've made? Just want to understand your perspective on what the market is looking like. And then let's talk about jobs. You're on mute, Raman.
Hi, Gaurav, and thanks for having me on this. And hi, Sumant, Praveer, and Shalini. Short answer, yes. We are focused in India. We feel good about this investment. I don't know about when you say the word safe investments. I think every investment goes through phases of turbulence, but we have deep confidence in the long-term story. And I think it takes hard work too, right? It takes, strong, experienced hands. Takes a lot of hard work, and that's how you make bets safe. But the simple answer to that is yes, we're focused on India long term.
And look, COVID has precipitated, it's a continuing crisis, it's a continuing health crisis, but it's also precipitated a job crisis. And it's very clear that that's going to become a major flashpoint for how even the government thinks about what they're going to promote. So there will be this question, even in any investment that's going into energy, around either saving existing jobs, which clearly still the majority sit in conventional energy, versus the role that renewable energy has in terms of not just the energy mix, but creating future jobs. What does that equation look like? Like, is renewable energy also a great way to drive job creation?
So, if I step back for a moment, and we'll bring COVID into this, but the government's planned 450 gigawatts, right? That's their goal. And they've already shown that they can exceed previously set goals. We're at 35 gigs, which is more than we said, a decade ago. We said 20 gigs by 2022. We're at 35 and it's 2020. It's 2 years early and it's nearly double. So that's not bad. So, we could get to a few hundred gigawatts by 2030. Now, if we do get to this 450 gigawatt target, by my basic calculations, and someone correct, some math whiz can correct me if I'm wrong, that'd be 1.5 million acres of land. And a lot of this is wasteland. So first you think of access to income for farming communities, marginal farmers who have 1/2 to 2 acres of land. What would 1.5 million acres of land monetized do? So rough calculations based on what we pay for land, and what we do is we use a lease model. So not only do they get a small upfront fee, they also get 25 years of income. And by my math, that would be 60,000 crores of money, split about 1/3 upfront and 2/3 over 25 years. And that would be into 200 to 500,000 farmers' hands, 2 to 5 lakh farmers' farming hands, depending on the size of the marginal holders. That's not bad. Now, those aren't jobs, but that's an income stream that allows them to go and work and find other kinds of jobs. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people if we just execute what we're already doing. Now let's talk about real jobs. And I've seen a whole stack of numbers out there, but if it's 1 to 1.5 lakh jobs that's created with 10 gigawatts, 12 gigawatts of constructed capacity on an annual basis, and we can hit 450 gigs, that means we have to do about 40 gigs a year. So you have to do 4x, that's 4 lakh jobs a year. And these are factory jobs. These are logistics jobs. These are basic technical jobs offered into, from ports to remote parts of India, which are 3 hours plus from airports, et cetera. And these are future-proof jobs. These are jobs building the solar industry. So we're talking about lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of jobs. We already have some of this happening and more of this to come.
Great. And let me then tie this, and I'd love to get both Praveer and Sumant's view on this. Make in India. Now, that's a double-edged sword, right? Like your supply chain currently for renewables, some of it is Indian, but a lot of it is coming from all over the world. And you have ambitious targets. How do you guys see Make in India as an opportunity What are some of the things that you'd be saying to the government right now as they're thinking about this ongoing fiscal stimulus and policies around the role Make in India has in the energy space? Or maybe it doesn't have an impact. Sumant, maybe I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Well, look, I think that there is a pretty important part of the value chain, which is the equipment piece, right? Now, in both wind and solar, it probably accounts for approximately 60 to 70% of the total cost of a project. And if I look at, let's say, 450 gigawatts, that's perhaps maybe a $300 billion investment. So we're talking really about close to about $200 billion of equipment to be manufactured and sold over the next 10 years, about $20 billion on average every year. That's a pretty large amount. And as a country, I would say that we should not want to lose that amount to any other outside country. We shouldn't have to import all of this equipment. Now, the good news for us is that in wind, the industry is already localized. All the components are already manufactured in India. The wind turbines are assembled and manufactured in India. The blades are manufactured here. Some of the towers are imported, but otherwise, a lot of them are manufactured in India as well. So I think in wind, we don't really have a problem, right? So that's already happening here, and that's terrific. Solar is really where we have a problem. And in solar, let's for argument's sake, say that we have to import 10 to 12 or 10 to $15 million of solar modules every year. That today is almost 90% of that is happening from China. And we cannot allow that to happen. That is very clear. And I think the government of India absolutely recognizes that and does not want that to happen either. So I think what's going to therefore happen is that over the next couple of years, you'll see a lot of push to have domestic manufacturing. You'll have customs duties being imposed on module imports. You'll have some incentives being given for domestic manufacturing. So all of that will happen, and I'm pretty clear in my mind that maybe 3-4 years down the road, a lot of manufacturing for solar modules will also begin to shift to India. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing from a cost standpoint for Indian solar, because the cost will go up. I mean, China, unfortunately, is the cheapest source of solar, and Indian manufacturing will be more expensive, certainly to begin with, and potentially on an ongoing basis as well. And so, therefore, we have to be prepared for the fact that costs of solar energy in India will rise to some extent. Now, 3-4 years later, they may still be cheaper than where the price is right now, but it might have been low had we been able to have Chinese imports. So I think this is just the dichotomy, the paradox, the contradiction in our current situation. I think we need to encourage a domestic manufacturing industry. It is going to lead to higher solar energy costs for the end customer. But the good news is that because solar is already so cheap, I think solar can absorb that extra cost. And so I think, therefore, you'll have more and more manufacturing happening in India eventually.
And Praveer, do you agree with that? And do you also see that side of the value chain as a real opportunity? I know the Tatas have made various forays into this space in the past. Sorry, you're on mute at the moment.
Okay. I agree with Sumant that there is a great opportunity, but there is a cost aspect. The Indian market should be ready to absorb that sort of cost. Of course, one of the ways of doing it is to have the higher customs duty or the safeguard duty, and to that extent, make yourself competitive vis-a-vis the Chinese. But the Chinese economies of scale today is such that it becomes very, very difficult for Indian companies to compete. To tell you very frankly, Tata Power started manufacturing solar panels and solar cells way back in 1991. But it's a small facility, economies of scale is not there. And then the whole challenge of costing and the transportation, logistic, all that is something which does not make it very attractive compared to what similar products we get from China. So we also end up buying large quantity from China. But I think at some stage, the government should put together a package. Like in automobile, you have ancillary units. Similarly, for renewable, you need to, especially solar, you need to have ancillary units where someone will just manufacture the panels, someone will get the wafers, someone will do the glass sheets, so someone will do the structure. So you need to create the ecosystem for making this happen. And the government intervention in this will be very, very critical if they want to do it on a long-term basis, whereby they need to protect the Indian industry if they want to go and demonstrate that India can manufacture large quantity of solar panels to meet its own requirement. So I think that there is a great opportunity on this. I just want to also touch upon some of the issues that Shalini mentioned, especially in the rural area, and how we can, because this is an area that we work. First of all, it's a very difficult business model, and these business models cannot be working on CSR fund. We have tried this earlier, and we said we will do it through CSR funding. We can do 100 of them, 200 of them, 500 of them, but that's it. It will be on a certain stage, not scale up to the extent it is required. India has 600,000 villages. There are nearly 200,000 villages which have more than 500 homes, so that there are nearly 2,000 people staying in each of these villages. And there is definitely an opportunity. In fact, when we went to develop the microgrids over there, we found that the microgrid is actually turning into a secondary business, and the primary business is the micro enterprise development, because the consumption of energy in the villages is very small. It's per month is 8 units, in a year is 100 units. And I don't think by any stretch of imagination we'll be able to become whatever is the country average today of 1100 or 1200 or the Chinese average and things like that. So that sort of consumption pattern will not happen in the villages, at least in the near future. So how do you generate consumption? And for that, the micro enterprises, whether for irrigation purpose, you can give it to the farmers and ensure that they not only use water for their farmlands, but also for the neighboring farmlands also. And the model that we said that within 3 kilometer or 5 kilometer radius, they can distribute water and not electricity. So that's one of the model. We said, can you do a flour mill? Everyone requires to eat, and atta chakki is something which is very common. You can do value additions in all these places. Mustard is grown in large quantity. So can you use oil expeller over there? So there are a number of activities that can be done over there, but you need to create. So you end up creating the infrastructure for that. You go and tie up with equipment manufacturers who can do it. You typically would like that there should be energy efficient equipments that they should manufacture. You go and tie up with financing companies, with insurance companies. You also end up working with some of the other developers who can come and support the farmers in terms of what sort of input they should use, what sort of nutrients they should use. So I think there is a huge opportunity, but I think the money is not there. And, Shalini mentioned about affordability. How do you, in 99 rupees, give them 2 bulbs, 1 fan and 1 mobile charging? Or if they want a TV, also give them at 150 rupees. The Gram Kutir Yojana or Kutir Jyoti Yojana. So all those are at a very, very low cost. And though of course the government provides all that supply, but they supply intermittently. As a private entity, people will expect a good quality service from you. And how do you make it affordable? How do you make it commercially viable? Because if it's not viable, you cannot scale up. You cannot do 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. And India needs that. India definitely needs that sort of a solution.
Let me bring Dr. Sarin in on that question, because I mean, this is an area that, we're saying two different things, right? So in some cases, big industry saying, protect us, there's let's have subsidies, or let's make Chinese goods more expensive. We know that anytime you have anything to do with trade wars, it's actually the common person that ends up paying, right? This is what's always been wrong about Trump's policies on trade. It's actually his consumer that ends up paying. And the same is true here, right? I mean, if we are going to try and both create these mini grids and so forth, but we're increasing the input cost of all of them, especially in the short term, it is the common person that will have to pay more. So Dr. Sarin, how does that sit with you? And then perhaps you can also speak a little bit about energy efficiency. Whenever you talk to power producers, energy efficiency isn't necessarily top of their mind, but what's the role of energy efficiency here?
Yeah, I'll break it up into two parts. And thanks, Praveer, for bringing that up, because this is an area that I feel very strongly about and concerned that we don't go back to the old ways of working. Market viability is absolutely important, and therefore it is not just the CSR, but it is the collaboration between the corporates, the foundation, so the development sector, corporates, and the government who have to come together. And subsidies can be an answer only for a short term, because subsidies kill the market. And we've seen that in the past as well. So we cannot rely on subsidies for too long. We have to create demand. And I think for the first time, at least I see a light at the end of this tunnel. I see an opportunity with the migrant workers going back and the demand balance shifting a little bit. And therefore, what you are talking about, local produce, local flour mills, value-added services, food processing, cold storage, milk products, they need cold storage, they need refrigeration. I mean, I think for the first time, I see that the demand in our suburban or rural areas is shifting. And this is an opportunity that needs collaboration of this entire ecosystem that Praveer just mentioned. It's not just with affordable products that we will be able to get that. And I take your point, Sumant, on, for some time, we will have more expensive products because we cannot get the economies of scale like that China can get. But I'm not touching upon that topic right now. It is the access, it is the demand, it is new businesses emerging. Did we ever imagine the internet use and the penetration in the rural India, which is as much as it is today? I believe it's not just the Delhi schools which are using internet for learning, but it has also gone down to our villages. So because of the demand, because of our investment in the rural and the suburban areas, providing the product, the access, the affordable, the financing support, and the market linkages which will be there. I'm talking about self-sufficiency. A village which generates its own power, which charges its own e-rickshaws, which creates its own mills for their own consumption, flour mills, and also has the ability to export to other states the processed food or milk products that they produce. I'm talking about all that support through the ecosystem partnership.
And we're going to come back to that again. I just do want to ask Raman also his views on this idea of Make in India and what that means for some of his short-term, medium-term economics. And then let's shift also to, this is a policy reset opportunity, right? There does seem to be an appetite for that. What's working for you as big developers and also as entrepreneurs in this space? And what do you think are things that really the government should now focus on as it's sort of thinking about a policy reset and also obviously thinking about a fiscal stimulus? So Raman, maybe starting with you, firstly, do answer that question of what do you think about this Make in India, and are those the kind of short-term costs you want to absorb?
Sure. And the question we've asked is, how can you compete with China? Because why do you want to have a subsidy and begin a journey when you know you won't be competitive and maybe you can't build a global leadership role in manufacturing? So how do you match, how do you equal China's might in manufacturing, given you have a 450 gigawatt opportunity? And I think it comes down to scale and building an ecosystem and then having the patience for 3 or 4 years to do that. And that's the fundamental question that we don't have an answer to, that why with 400 or 500 gigawatts of demand in a short term. I mean, when you talk about building manufacturing industries, 10 years is a short term. And you have virtually certain demand. There's a track record, as someone said, it's the lowest cost source of power now. We're now on the big boys table. So the question is, how do you double down and commit to a 10-year plan that allows us to be not just competitive, but really occupy the global leadership role that we should? So I don't have a specific answer to that. We've thought about this a lot, and I don't want to take up too much time. We have ideas on it, but I think it does have to happen in coordination with the government. It would take more than one agency, which often adds complexity, because exactly how it's happened in China. It's a package of financing incentives, innovation incentives, it's ecosystems of glass suppliers and backsheet suppliers and polysilicon purifiers, etc., that come together that create this tremendous resilience. And they're battle scarred. They've gone up and down again and again. How do we match that? That's the question, right? But you don't want to, my feeling is you don't want to enter this without a 10-year plan where you can be competitive. So that's on manufacturing. But as someone said, it's about $300 billion in terms of the opportunity for 50 gigs. We already do about 100, 125 of that in India, right? So the question is, can the government commit to bringing in the balance 150, 175 worth of, of manufacturing potential over the next 10 years, 10 to 15 gigs a year. In terms of, what's worked well, again, I take my hat off because, we've done this concept called solar parks in India. And I think 50 have now been planned, 12 are operational. And look, nothing is perfect. These are, thousands, many thousands of acres of land in remote parts of India. Nothing's perfect, but it works pretty well. And I'm sure every developer would agree, this is one of the harder things to do. To aggregate thousands and thousands of acres of land is not a simple thing to do. So to have that kind of momentum, I don't know of any other company, of any other country in the world that has been so pioneering in providing land and grid services at this scale and with this momentum. 12 are done, we're already on 3 of them, and we hope to be on more. 50 are planned. More of those would be great. It would just provide that infrastructure package on the site, which developers could then be attracted to. Then it's the grid, and we know many tens of thousands of crores have been spent after many years of planning the green corridor to connect the big sunshine belts and the big wind corridors to our big cities, our metros and our industrial areas. That's going well. We're going to really need to double down on that because we're still on the tens of gigawatt scale, right? And we're going to go into hundreds of gigawatt scale. So it's great work, but we're just getting started. So how we continue to do that, continue to keep the momentum that's already been developed would be very important. Already you look at the progress in terms of the contract, the power purchase agreement contract, the termination compensation clauses, the payment security guarantees. So making sure those are fully funded, et cetera, attracts international investors. Because again, $300-400 billion to be spent, not just in terms of the CapEx, but in terms of the manufacturing you're going to set up to meet that CapEx. If you have an internationally bankable contract, as we've shown that we can do, you'll attract international finance. Why should domestic lenders be the only ones to have to finance that? And that's already happening. I'm sure, almost all of us who are solar developers are using, access to both Indian and non-Indian sources of capital. So why not attract more international investment into India? So that's on the land, the grid, and the contract, which are the 3 enablers that then allow the manufacturers and the global investors to come in and be a part of this 400-500 gigawatt journey. In terms of specific things that I would ask the government, one of the things is there is a new Electricity Act coming out. There's been talk about this is to do with coordination between agencies. So between the time you win an auction and you celebrate to the time you have a fully enforceable PPA, power purchase contract, which lasts for 25 years, there are 4 or 5 steps, which involve states, it involves different jurisdictions. Sometimes there's a slip here or there. Sometimes it's a deliberate slip by one of the actors, no pointing fingers. But what would help this coordination, and it's something that's being thought through and it's something that we would support, is this idea of the Electricity Contracts Enforcement Authority that would help bring the states and the central agencies together. And when you have a dispute resolution mechanism, you often find you have fewer disputes. So I think that this would be a great authority to launch alongside the CEA, the Central Electricity Authority, CERC, and the alphabet soup of the other agencies. That's one. And then, as I said, around the grid, there's a waiver on interstate transmission. I would keep that because, as we said, the big sunny areas are sometimes dislocated from the big manufacturing areas, et cetera. So I would ask that we keep that post 2022. But those are some specifics on a broader scheme of, I think, a job tremendously well done. These are hard things to do in remote parts of India. and to execute at this scale. So phenomenal momentum by the government of India. I just say when you go from tens of gigawatts to hundreds, you got to just double down and keep doing it.
And Sumant, would you agree with that set of priorities, or would you add anything when you're thinking about a message to government as they're thinking about the reset? Hi, could you guys hear me?
Yes, very well.
I think we might have. I think Sumant's screen is frozen. Let me. I was going to ask Praveer the same question. As you think about what the message you would give to government in terms of their fiscal stimulus and a potential reset, even in some of these policies, that appetite seems to be there. So, do you agree with Raman's priorities? Are there additional ones you'd place on that?
Absolutely agree with Raman. These are the standard documents that we have. So all guys who are working in power companies, they continuously repeat the same thing with whomsoever they meet in the government. So, these are things that has been troubling the power sector for many years, and all of us have articulated this in some platform or the other, in some way or the other, to the government. Unfortunately, the government has its own pace of doing things, but still things happen. It takes sometimes a little more time than it should. But I think these are the things that the government has to take. It's part of the agenda of the government, and I'm sure sooner than later many of these will get implemented.
Well, then let me ask you a slightly different question. We've talked about that the government had set a pretty bold agenda, and it's already, with respect to renewables or green energy, and it's already starting to achieve that earlier than expected. The question I have is, does the COVID crisis and the fact that there is a big call now for major public investments, and there's also a huge recognition of the role that clean energy plays just in our own general experience and health. People are suddenly experiencing clean air. Is there an opportunity to get together and say we can go from bold to even bolder? Is there another inflection point in the kind of targets that the country can set? And from your perspective as people in the industry, and are those achievable, right? So look at today's targets. Would you be able to double or triple those? And is that called for?
We need to understand that power is a concurrent subject. There is a plan that Government of India makes, but the implementation of the plan is done by the state discoms and the state governments. Now, I'm not sure that whether the state governments and all the state governments, the 30 of them now, and the state discoms, they are on the same page as far as the Government of India is concerned. So there is a huge gap, and until and unless the type of reforms which is required to happen in the state government, state discom, that does not happen, many of these will aspirationally very good and should happen, may not be possible to meet the target. So I think until and unless the reform that is supposed to happen in the state discoms, that does not take place, they have the ability to buy power and pay for it. They have the ability to increase the demand, because it's not that the demand is not there. Even last year, the peak in summer was 180 gigawatt. It's not that the peak in the country is 180 gigawatt. If possibly there was no restriction, it would have gone to maybe 220, 230. So there is a huge pent-up demand which is there. And until and unless the discoms are in a position and they have the money with them and the wherewithal to buy that power and pay for it, this sort of change will not happen. And I think the government is looking at bringing the new Electricity Act with the amendments. Possibly some of those aspects might get covered, but there is huge amount of work that the government has to do. And when I say government, it's not Government of India, but it's more the state governments who have to fall in line. The cumulative losses of all these state discoms put together every year is more than $10 billion, and it gets added every year. So until and unless the fundamental change will not happen in the power sector, These numbers, while they look very good and we will possibly reach 50 or 70% of the target, we'll never be able to reach the full target until unless everyone comes on the same page and they are committed to meeting the targets that have been set by the government.
And Sumant, are you able to hear us now? We lost you earlier.
Yeah, the light went out.
Okay, that's ironic.
It happens pretty often.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard most of that, but I guess we are talking about what are those priorities that you see that government could be thinking about in this COVID recovery. So both from a policy perspective, but also in the sort of the fiscal stimulus. And does it also mean that this is an opportunity to leverage to say, okay, there's already bold targets out there, but can we even go for another level of scale? And I'm trying to bring a few of those things together because we're talking about competing against China. A domestic market that's even a higher scale is going to help on that front. And the other thing I would love you to also talk about is innovation. So scale is one thing, but where's the opportunity for us to also innovate our way out of this? You guys have recently set up a 24-hour pure solar project, if I'm not mistaken. You know, these kind of things are like right on the cutting edge of what's possible through renewables. So what's the role also of the Indian industry in also just innovating in this space as well? And does the post-COVID economic recovery provide us a sort of an opportunity to push for something like that?
Okay, well, there are two very separate and different questions in that. So let me try to answer them. So first question being, what can the Indian government do? So I think the government is already doing quite a few things. I think the key issue in our sector is, as Praveer said, DISCOM financial health. And that's something that passes its way back into the entire value chain. So DISCOMs have to be fixed. And I think if that part of the overall value chain is fixed, then I think really there's nothing else that in some ways needs to be done. Everything else seems to be working reasonably well. Of course, we have a regulatory system that also does not work too well. So that, concurrently can also get fixed along with it. And the Electricity Act amendments that the government is just about to, or has introduced now, a lot of these things are sought to be addressed. So hopefully, these issues will get resolved at some point in the near future. Also, if you recall, the finance minister announced this program of 90,000 crores yesterday, and linked to that is an improvement by the DISCOMs that they have to promise to undertake. Now, they have made these promises in the past as well and not kept them. So let's see whether it is in fact more effective this time. But meanwhile, I think we can all do with the 90,000 crores. So let's get that into the system as well. So I think that really is what needs to be done. I think DISCOM reform and use the levers of the central government's disposal, the Electricity Act, the funding, to try to push through some of these reforms with the
Did we have another electricity outage? I think we might have.
So it had
Yogi.
The power guy had an outage.
Well, I think this is a good segue to you, Dr. Sarin, because that's the common person's experience. I think it would be good
Gaurav,
to... are we back?
If you agree, I'll come on the innovation part of it. And
please do.
Yeah.
At a huge amount of work that is going. We have ourselves been involved along with Tata Trust, Department of Science and Technology, and also Niti Aayog, to set up something known as the Clean Energy International Incubation Hub, which is in Delhi. We have right now, I think, 25 startups who are working. And I can tell you that some of the things that they are doing is absolutely fantastic work. Simple thing, a small ceiling fan we wanted for the village, which should be able to be the most efficient fan. The best ones that were there in India were 50 watt. The ones which are the normal that you get in the market is 80 watt. These kids made a 20 watt fan, a 20 watt TV. So there's huge amount of work in smart metering and all that is going. And many of them actually are now good to go to the market and use not only in India, but also in other developing countries. So there's huge amount of work that is being promoted, but more can be done. And I think there is a great opportunity because the distributed generation and some of the new solutions which are coming in terms of hybrid solutions and all that were never tried earlier. And in the Indian context, everything is very different. You know, India, we wanted to do the storage system, 45, 47 degrees normal in the Indian villages. Now, most of the batteries beyond 40 degrees, they are not able to operate. Their life goes down by 50%. And when we started using it, we realized that the life of the battery instead of 10 years has become 3 years. So a lot of work that needs to be done, which is happening, but more would be welcome and more would be at the time.
Thanks for sharing that. Dr. Sarin, you were also going to come in, I think, on a similar.
Yeah. And you know, this is exactly the kind of work that we need to do, like Social Alpha by Tata Trust that Praveer was just talking about. And I didn't touch upon the energy efficiency question that you asked me previously. Frankly, I'm concerned about that a lot, though we all realize that we can generate or produce as much energy as we want, but the demand keeps increasing and the number of gadgets that we have are increasing, and therefore we will never be able to keep pace, even with renewables, with that kind of demand. I hope that COVID has given us some realization and frugality and conservation becomes a mantra. But as you would know, that all the sensors and smart devices, as we call them, which are more energy efficient, are a little bit more expensive than the regular ones. And whether it's the Saint-Gobain's glass or the controls or whatever else that we talk about, I anticipate that there will be a dip before we see the the spike again, because though there is realization, the reality is that where is the money? And that's going to be a big challenge. And I don't know how it will play out.
No, I think thanks for covering that. And I'm just going to give one quick last word to Sumant, because I know we keep losing him and I keep breaking his flow. So Sumant, are you back on? And did you want to just finish that last thought that you had?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. You know, the light goes and then the internet drops and then it comes back and then again, so it's very irritating. No, the point I was making on the innovation front, which is the second question that he'd asked me, was that, unlike Praveer, who has a bit more of a consumer mindset perhaps because of his background in the discom side, my focus is a little bit more on the generation side. And there are two clear areas of innovation that I see. One clearly is the area of digital that potentially allows us to see the performance of our machines and our solar farms better and get more out of it. So I think that's one big area. And the second big area is in how to firm up renewable energy at the lowest possible cost. And the more you can firm it up, the more you are likely to be able to compete with the firmer sources of power such as coal and so on. And so I think a lot of work needs to happen in that area as well, and is happening right now. And I think, I think that's the direction in which we're going to go.
Great, thanks. And I don't know if it is, sorry, was someone just trying to come in? Okay, if not, because we have to switch between panels, we're going to have to close this panel now. So I won't go through any of the further questions. We did try and cover many of the questions that people who are listening in were asking. So that's how I'd sort of frame the question. But I guess to summarize, I would say, there's this big question that's always been there about jobs versus sustainability versus access versus the overall, this is how much we need to generate in the country to meet our sort of GDP needs. And there's been a sense that that's been a divergent question, that jobs may lie over here, sustainability may lie over there, access actually may lie in a completely different place. I think what we heard today was not just because of COVID, but because of many factors that have already been bubbling for the last 10 years, But the real sort of realization that any big investment that happens from here on in should be in the green space, because the green space is no longer a compromise. It's both delivering affordable energy at scale, but also a great source for future jobs. And there is a huge awakening in the country on the need for sustainability, which is one of the topics we'll talk about later in one of the upcoming panels. So it was fantastic for us to sort of hear that from what I would call the horse's mouths, people who are in the industry, either as entrepreneurs or working with in mini grids, right up to big renewable energy and conventional players. So we're very fortunate to have had all four of you join us for this panel. And I think the audience is being streamed both on YouTube and on Zoom. So we've got a pretty large audience to listen in. Thank you so much